Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling something that I think hits home for a lot of us, especially in the content creation world.
Hmm.
We're talking work-life balance.
Big one.
Huge. And to help us, well, we're diving deep into a video from Sean Cannell, Think Media.
Oh, yeah.
He did this great piece called How I Balance YouTube, Work, and Personal Life, which honestly, as soon as I saw the title, I was like, I need all of Sean's wisdom on this one.
Yeah. It can be a struggle trying to juggle everything, especially when you're in that content creation game. Always on, always hustling.
Right. And Cannell's really honest right off the bat. He's like, that classic idea of balance, the
Hmm.
scales tipping perfectly, it's kind of a myth.
Yeah, he talked about honoring your season, which I thought was super insightful. Like acknowledging that where you are in life right now impacts what balance even looks like.
Makes total sense. For content creators, sometimes our seasons are like super intense bursts.
Oh, absolutely.
One month you're launching a course, the next you're dealing with a viral hit, maybe some burnout on top of that. And then you got client work, your own projects.
Right. It's never just one thing. It's that constant evolution that makes it tough to find that steady ground. Cannell uses the example of when his wife was hospitalized. He actually went all in on YouTube during that time,
Wow.
which, worked for him in that moment.
Hmm.
But it highlights how unique each person's situation is. There's no one-size-fits-all balance formula.
It's making me rethink that whole idea of balance altogether. He actually suggests focusing on navigation instead, being more self-aware and adjusting as you go.
Yeah, that resonates, especially in the content world, right? Things are constantly in flux, algorithms,
Mm.
trends. We need to be adaptable.
Big time. Think about it. Have you ever felt like truly balanced? Like life and work in perfect harmony? I'm guessing it was pretty fleeting.
Oh, yeah, it's a rare moment. Because let's be real, for content creators, work bleeds into like every aspect of life. Your phone's always buzzing, inspiration can hit at any moment. It's tough to switch off completely.
That's why Cannell's advice on prioritizing really hit home for me. He quotes Rory Vaden, and it's a bit of a tough love quote. He says, if you have more than three priorities, you have no priorities.
Wow, yeah, that one stings a little. I know I'm guilty of trying to do it all.
Me too. So the question is, how do we narrow it down? How do we figure out those top two, three things that deserve our focus, especially when, as content creators, we're constantly being pulled in different directions?
Well, Cannell's a huge proponent of calendar blocking.
Okay, but we're not just talking basic scheduling here.
Right. It's about recognizing that creating content, for us IS work,
Hmm.
it needs dedicated time, just like client calls or editing sessions, not just squeezed in whenever you have a spare moment.
He actually talks about learning that the hard way, missing family events because he hadn't planned ahead, got caught up in projects. I think it's so easy to do that.
Oh, absolutely.
You get in the zone and suddenly it's like 3 hours later. But those personal appointments need to be just as non-negotiable.
For sure. Block off time for vacations,
Yeah.
creative brainstorming, even just downtime. It all feeds back into your work.
Yeah.
It's not separate.
And speaking of tough choices, Cannell brings up this thing called the law of sacrifice. Is he saying we have to, live this life of deprivation to succeed as content creators? No fun allowed.
No, not quite. It's more about recognizing that trade-offs are inevitable.
Okay.
So maybe you sacrifice, say, binge-watching Netflix to learn a new editing skill, or you turn down a low-paying client to make time for your passion project. It's strategic.
So it's not giving up everything. It's choosing what you're willing to let go of to make room for what matters most. For us, I think that often comes down to our time and attention. And that leads into his point about setting boundaries, right?
100%. He uses this analogy that I love. He's like, predefine your boundaries the way you would in a relationship if you wanted to stay faithful.
Okay, interesting comparison.
Right. But for content creators, our relationship is with our work, our audience, but also with ourselves and our well-being.
So we're talking about setting those clear limits, like no emails after a certain hour, not taking on projects outside our niche, maybe even how much we share of our personal lives online.
Exactly. It's about protecting your energy, your focus, so you can create the best content possible. And Cannell actually suggests writing those boundaries down, almost like a content creation constitution.
I love that. Okay, so we've talked about priorities, time blocking, boundaries. Now, for the part I'm most excited about, his biggest tip is all about creating leverage. This is where things get really interesting.
Oh, yeah. This is where the magic happens. Cannell's all about finding ways to buy back your time. He starts small, like could you hire a house cleaner? Simple stuff. But for content creators, maybe that translates to finally hiring a video editor or a VA to handle those tasks that just drain your energy.
Freeing up that mental space.
Yes, and he emphasizes it doesn't have to be about spending tons of money. Even simple automation tools can make a huge difference. Social media scheduling, batch creating content, there's a whole world of leverage out there.
And he talks about his ranked YouTube videos as being like employees working for him 24/7. Mind blown. I want to hear more about that.
Let's dig into it. It's a concept that goes way beyond YouTube, I think. It's about building an ecosystem, not just like churning out content constantly. Kinnell's ranked video thing is all about that compounding effect. And it made me realize it's not just a YouTube strategy.
Right. It applies to evergreen content in general, right? We were talking about that stuff that's not chasing trends. For us, that could be like a blog post that keeps getting traffic or an online course people buy year-round.
Exactly. It's about strategic creation. Think about those ultimate guide articles or videos. Those are evergreen gold mines. They rank well in search, constantly bring in new people, and they position you as the expert.
It's like building a solid foundation for your whole content empire. But that takes time up front, right? So how do we, as busy creators, actually find the time to make this evergreen stuff happen?
Well, that's where all those other things Kinnell talks about become crucial. Protecting your time, setting those boundaries. Think of it this way. Those low-paying client projects that eat up your week. Maybe saying no to one of those frees up time to create that amazing evergreen course you've been thinking about.
That's a tough choice, but probably a smart one in the long run. It's like investing in your future self, right? A little short-term sacrifice for long-term gain. And Kinnell talks about buying back time, even in small ways.
And for content creators, that could mean finally taking the plunge and hiring that video editor you've been putting off. Suddenly, you have hours back in your week to brainstorm those evergreen topics, really engage with your audience, do the things that actually move the needle.
He also talks about how his YouTube videos are like employees working for him 24/7, which honestly blew my mind a little bit. But for us, it might not be YouTube. What are some other ways we can set things up so they're working even when we're not?
Here's a super practical example. Email automation. You create a welcome sequence for new subscribers once, and it just keeps nurturing those relationships, maybe driving sales or engagement completely on autopilot. That's leverage in action.
So it's not just about the content itself, it's about the systems we build around it. It's like those content calendars people are always raving about, planning ahead so you're not, scrambling for ideas at the last minute.
Exactly. Systems and processes are key, and there are tons of tools to help us out too. Think about social media scheduling, project management apps. They seem like small wins, but they free up so much mental bandwidth for that creative work.
This is making me totally rethink what success even looks like as a content creator. It's not just about followers or views, it's about building something sustainable.
And adaptable. Remember Kinnell's point about navigation? For us, that's huge. Trends change, algorithms evolve. We need systems that can bend with those changes, not break under them.
Which actually makes me think about something else you mentioned earlier, building community as a form of leverage. How does that fit into this whole picture?
This is where it gets really interesting, I think. Kinnell talks about building a team, but for content creators, our community can actually become an extension of that team, in a way.
Okay, now I'm intrigued. How so?
Think about it. Engaged followers, they're the ones sharing your content, giving you feedback, maybe even becoming collaborators. That's leverage you can't buy. It's about fostering genuine connection, not just chasing numbers.
So instead of just viewing our audience as passive consumers, we're building relationships, which honestly, for a lot of content creators, is the most fulfilling part of the whole thing anyway.
Right. It totally ties into Kinnell's honoring your season idea. Maybe your current season is all about building that community foundation. It might not be as flashy as going viral, but it sets you up for success down the road.
This is like a total mindset shift. It's not just about me creating content. It's about us building something together that feels way more sustainable and honestly way more exciting.
And that actually leads me to something that's been on my mind as we've been talking.
Ooh, lay it on me. What you thinking?
Well, we've been discussing how creators can leverage their content, their systems, their communities. But what about leveraging our own knowledge and experience?
Okay, I see where you're going with this. But how do we turn that into something like tangible, something that's working for us even when we're not directly involved?
That's the million-dollar question, right? It's like Kinnell's ranked videos. They're essentially little packages of his knowledge, working for him 24/7.
So how do we package our own expertise in a way that keeps giving back? It could be mentoring other creators, creating templates or guides. The possibilities are kind of endless.
Exactly. And this is where I think the line gets blurry between work and life for content creators.
Yeah.
Our experiences, our passions, they all feed into our content, and they can be leveraged in ways we might not even realize at first.
This deep dive is turning into a full-on brainstorming session. I'm already thinking about how to apply this to my own work, but I feel like we've just scratched the surface of this leveraging your knowledge thing.
You're absolutely right. It's a topic that deserves its own deep dive for sure. But before we go too far down that rabbit hole, I wanted to shift gears a little bit and talk about something else Cannell mentions that's super important for content creators.
Oh, I'm all ears.
Yeah,
What else do we need to unpack? All right, so we're talking about leveraging our knowledge, kind of like those ranked videos Cannell's always going on about, right?
Yeah,
Packaging up your expertise so it works for you even when you're not actively at it.
exactly. And it really got me thinking about how, as content creators, there are so many ways to do that. It could be something like creating an ebook or a course, maybe offering coaching or consulting, or even putting together templates and tools that can help other people streamline their processes.
So we become like mini Sean Cannells ourselves.
Uh-huh, I love that. But it's true. We all have something valuable to share, even if we don't have millions of followers or, a fancy studio setup.
It's pretty empowering when you think about it, and it goes back to that whole community aspect we were talking about.
Hmm.
When you share your knowledge, it not only helps other people, but it strengthens those connections, creates a more collaborative vibe.
For sure. Just think about the impact you can have. Maybe you mentor another creator,
Mm.
or you offer feedback on a project, even just sharing a resource that helped you along the way. Those things create a ripple effect.
Totally. It's like planting seeds that'll keep growing and blossoming, and it makes the whole ecosystem more vibrant.
And that's what's so cool about this idea of leverage. It's not just about individual gain. It's about making a positive impact that benefits the entire community.
This deep dive has honestly been a game changer for me. I'm walking away with a whole new perspective on what it means to, create a career as a content creator that's both fulfilling and sustainable.
Me too. I hope our listeners are feeling inspired, ready to build the kind of life and career that really aligns with their passions and their vision for the future.
Absolutely. And speaking of our awesome listeners, we'd love to hear from you. What resonated with you most from today's deep dive? What are some ways you create leverage in your own work? Hit us up on social media. We're always learning from our amazing community.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep creating.